gambler because I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
So if people don't know, with Gamer Supps, my favourite energy formula, it's keto friendly, has less than 1 calorie per serving. I find it has a very pleasant, like slow rise, and then you have a very nice long plateau, I feel like, and then you don't get the harsh drop off. I find it's just actually quite a pleasant, just like taper off really gradually. And then at that point in time, I always say, I know I'm done for the day then. I don't usually have a second portion and go longer than that. Once I've got my first day's energy out of the way and I've run out, yeah, I'm probably ready to go. So I will try today's. Obviously, you can get 10% off, not just these flavours and all the other ones I recommend. Everything on the store of Gamer Supps with the code Thorin, THORIN, at gamersupps.gg. So this slide up here, this is, let's see, IM2 World Championship. Let me just double check something a second. Because I've got to say that I'm actually going to be, this is just to tilt myself, but I'm going to be mildly tilted if this is true. Right, this does tilt me. Because notice how they've written here, Intel Extreme Masters Season 1 World Championship. I'm going to tell you right now, that was never the name of this tournament. Like, I'm pretty sure, if I'm wrong, I'm not lying, but I'm pretty sure it was just called Intel Extreme Masters. I think what happened is they called it Global Finals and then years later World Championship, and then someone's retroactively done that thing where for some reason, I hate this because you should be specific to the name that you had at the time, in the same way as if someone says, I've changed my name for sexual identity reasons, if you're talking about them years earlier, of course you use the name they had years earlier because that's who they were at the time. That's just called being a historian, you fucking lunatics. So I don't think the should even be called World Championship. And as I said, it wasn't a World Championship. Like, notice how, where are all the qualifiers? You have to just play in an online European regular season. Look. Well, if it's a World Championship, how the fuck is the rest of the world qualifying? Where's the NA teams? Where's the Asian teams? There aren't any. So I think someone sadly has fucked around with that in the same way as they did something similar for the one that Mouse Sports won. So if you ever saw when Mouse Sports won that IEM, which wasn't a major, in early 2010 with Roman, some little fucker has also gone back and just edited it inappropriately. Where, watch. Because that tournament, the IEM Championship here, oh, there we go. They've actually changed it back now. Nice. Nice. I wonder if it's because I complained about it on stream, because I pointed out on stream that they had called this event. Oh, no, they have fucked it up, though. They didn't put it in the title, but they did this, right? Because this was around the area Cologne is. They tried to pretend like this is the originator of IEM Cologne, and they put here, location, Cologne. It wasn't held in Cologne. It was held in some other place that's smaller, outside of Cologne, like a small town or village or something. I know, I was there. It was the one I did my first commentary at with Joe Miller. So just a little pet peeve about how Wikipedia works on that one. But this one was a major for my money. I mean, you saw it had the Asians, it had the Koreans, who, by the way, almost won this major. So famously, this is when Mouse Sports got one of their best ever rosters together. This was the one where you had Six, who at the time was probably the best German player this year. I think later it was Roman, but this year I'd probably give it to him. It's between him and Roman, though. It's hard depending on the era. He was an all-round player. God B was a very skilled in-game leader. Goh was one of the best players of all time. He's starting to, these years where he's tapering off a little bit. He's Austrian. Carpio was a very skilled AK player, one of the best German players. Tixo was like... For me, Tixo was almost like a perfecto type player. It's like not a massive fragger. He's like the guy who just does his job and holds his spot all the time and has like lurky anchor spots or rotator spots sometimes. What am I talking about? Yeah, maybe like semi-lurk player or something like that. Famously, he would, as an example, on Inferno, he would always control the boiler room on T-side, if you don't know. It's a classic lurker spot, isn't it? So, especially if you go to the B side. So, one of the best lineups ever because... Crucially in this lineup, you are a tactical team because you've got God B. You've got good team play because they had a great mix of players. And you have a very skilled team, but not where like it's like a super team like some of the Swedish teams. This is like a skilled team with the balance of roles is fucking incredible. I actually would give you the analogy, if you want one, some of these players at the time were better than they are in this analogy. It's comparable to the current Mouse, where everyone's good at their role. No one's the absolute best in the world, but you're all pretty good at your role. Like the general balance of the squad. That's why this team had a good map pool. This team had a good style. This team had certain opponents they could always beat. And this lineup, this event is a very stacked event. Some very good teams here. Like, let's look who there are. This is the one time the Poles didn't make it because the Poles were notoriously terrible at qualifying online. So that hurts you. But aside from that, you've got Fnatic, who's still a very good team. You've got the Roccat team, who wins NGL1. That's a very skilled team too. This is like the second best Finnish team, just whatever, just an upset merchant. Alternate's still a solid squad and can win like German EPS. SOA is solid because they've got Trace, who's an up-and-coming player. SK Gaming's still got like some very skilled players. It's actually one of the years where they're still relevant. Virtus Pro, this is when they got Edward and Zeus. This was actually one of the better Virtus Pro lineups with upset potential. MIBR is still good, but you can see it's not like the proper lineup. This is when Kogu isn't playing. Astro is a very solid team of Korean players who've been on the rise and percolate in the last few years. In the tournament, you win your group without a loss. By the way, of the two groups, I think on paper you have the harder one, and you didn't lose any games here. This is very impressive stuff. You're even beating some of these teams on maps they like. This is very impressive. Then it was an interesting, like, single map double elim playoff bracket. So in that playoff bracket, you skip to here and you lose the domestic matchup against alternate attacks, who obviously played you a billion times closely. That's going to count against you. In the lower bracket, you beat SK Gaming incredibly close on Nuke. You beat alternate in the rematch with a massive revenge game. And then in the final, they start a map up and you just won 2 games, Dust and Cobble. Now, Cobble, I'm not a fan of that being in the map pool, but okay, it was in there. Astro, by the way, were just Inferno merchants at this tournament, by the way. Everyone played Inferno, and everyone was like, well, surely they can't beat us, and they just beat all these top teams. So it is a legit tournament to win. I think it was a very good lineup, but I've got to say, it's not actually that crazy a run, because realistically, what did you do? You won a group stage map over Fnatic, a group stage map over Roccat, an MIBR. That one's not even that big a deal. And then you beat SK and alternate, and then Astro. I feel like that's a B for now. Feels like a B overall. Like the team's an A, but it could be a B. Like, I actually do think this is one of the better rosters to play CS ever. I'll probably still give the Roman one, which didn't have its full time, the better status, but this might be, for me, like the second or third best German-based roster ever to play CS. Right, I'm going to guess it's going to be like a God B or Capio. Right, it's Capio, apparently. Capio smurfed there. Obviously, that wasn't what their fucking logo looked like back then, was it? Right, we're now going to get to... this looks like the Poles winning ESWC the second time, or... because it looks like Luke's in that picture. Let me just quickly check that. Let me just check my alarm, actually, because I just realised I used a solid amount of time up on that, actually. Yeah, we'd only have like 20 minutes left. Right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my alarm for 45 minutes. I think that's enough time to finish this, and at that point I'll do some Q&A and then we'll wrap for the night. Yes, there we go. So, right, I'm just going to look who this team here is. Let me see. I'm fairly sure, like I said, it's the Poles winning ESWC the second time. Yes, it is. It is. I actually should already have known, because if you actually see the white jersey they're wearing, that was actually the MYM jersey. It actually looks a little bit like the Real Madrid modern day jersey, if people know the classic white one. So this is obviously the second time they won ESWC, which is actually quite a big one, because this is when not only did they repeat as champions, but they actually beat a Korean team, Astro, in the final. Now, it's obviously the exact same lineup I've gone through in the past, because it's the Golden Five, so I don't need to run through all that. But this is 2008. I would say in 2008, they actually were one of the teams that struggled a little bit as the top end of the scene got insanely competitive. Like mTw upgraded with WIMP and became champions. Fnatic was still really good, but they also were taking a little bit of a backseat. For me, in 2008, teams like SK, Fnatic and the Poles had to actually get pushed out a little bit, because it was people like mTw was the dominant team. You had, let me think, who else was good in 2008? That was also, as I say, the Koreans were relevant at that time. Alternate had like upset potential because they had, this is actually before they got the other Roman in, so I guess they weren't as good at the time. You obviously had the Finns, but they kicked out Lurpis, so they were like a really strong team, but the more upset potential. So if we go and look, where were the polls in this one? This is when they obviously attended as Meet Your Makers, but they had to call themselves PGS Meet Your Makers because since they were reigning champions, I think that slot came from being Pentagram, and then MYM, it was something bullshit where they had to agree to use both names to get the slot or whatever. Like MYM was like graciously allowing them to play under that name or some BS. Right, they lost actually a group stage game immediately, so they lost to the Virtus Pro. Did it have... was it all Russian one? No, this is the Ukrainian majority Virtus Pro. It had Kane, the coach later of Navi, and then it had Zeus and Edward in. It's actually a pretty skilled lineup if people don't know. Let's see. So VP beat MYM in the last game, but they'd already gotten out of the group at this point on Inferno. Okay, start with a loss. You go down second group stage. You also lose again. Looks like, yes, this time you lost again on Inferno, this time to mTw. So you lost twice before you even made the playoffs. I tell you already, that's going to affect this win. Like, as I said, to me, this is more of a down year for the polls with this lineup. And also, so far, you've made it to the playoffs, but you've already lost 2 maps. In the playoffs, you played against Emulate as your first round opponent. I actually do think on paper that is the easiest opponent. Because this is quite a while after Emulate. Yes, you're remembering they won World Cyber Games 2007. Well, watch. That was back here. Remember, they had the awesome breakout at Game Goon. Then you won the World Cyber Games. Then you had a third place at DreamHack. So you're cooking at the moment. This is really good stuff. In 2008, you have like a third at Samsung European Championships. You have some French lands. Then you come in, and you go into WEG, all E-Stars. The problem is, by the time you get to here, you're just not that relevant from here onwards. So Emulate already was a flash in the pan winning. And actually, by the way, I mentioned this on a past episode, they could have won this 2-0. There was some insane fuckery on this second train one where I believe it was something like, even though this actual tournament was in ESWC in America, the admins, understandably, and people running the tournament were French. And I heard there was some like mad shenanigans with like what was going on like the stage, like maybe they could hear something else, some shit like that. I can't remember what the reason was. But anyway, MYM came through. It was almost poetic justice that when they didn't get denied and get 2-0, they then smashed the third map and went through. But this isn't the hardest round of 8 points. It's not that great a run so far, I've got to say. So you 2-1 them. In the semis, you play Mouse Sports. Now, Mouse Sports has won the previous major. They won the IM2, so they were actually a very strong team. So I think this is a very impressive win because you 16-0 them on train. Now, admittedly, it's a map you can 16-0 because you can cover the CT side, but that's very impressive. For Mouse to only get 7 rounds with a really balanced, one of their better lineups in history, that's big time. That's a top scalp. And then the final, you beat Eastro, who at the time is at contender status. They just don't ever win the big events. So they're more like a dark horse to win all the big events, but including majors. So that's a pretty good win, but it was incredibly close. And the third map was Toscan, which wasn't played in the competitive pool at this time. And I've heard both teams didn't really know how it played competitively. And like, I heard something mad, like attacks players were like helping the Eastro players like figure out the map, and that the Poles themselves had barely played it. And it was a really close one. But as a result, I actually feel like this is a pretty scoffed win. And also, if you look at the other side of the bracket, if you're the Poles and you say, hey, we made it to the final of ESWC, you're looking and expecting to play Fnatic or mTw. Those are the 2 massive names, maybe even alternate. The idea you play Eastro is very unlikely. I mean, a lot of people I told you thought their IM2 run to the final was a fluke because they just got Inferno a million times. And as you can see here, they won Inferno over Fnatic here. So actually, I think you've also got an easier opponent overall. So I actually don't think this is that great a run, to be fair. Like, Neo was a stud in this time period. That reminds me, actually, let's go look at the MVP thing a second. MVP... is Neo not even one of his Smurf tournaments? There's actually, for Neo, this is actually not even that crazy a set of numbers. And actually, I've got the stats for this one. I don't actually, sadly, have the stats for this one. Oh, that's a shame. That's not that crazy to me. That's kind of like a B or a C at the moment. I'm going to put that B for the moment. We're going to consider whether that even goes down to C. Right, then we have got mTw winning World Cyber Games 2008. I can already see from both the jersey and it says Cyber in the background, and I can see Sunday. So I can already tell you that is, it's WCG 2008. It's the one where SK could have won it, but mTw did some shenanigans on train with the Scout, which is why it's fitting 2 years later. Navi had their own shenanigans on train against them. So this is the mTw lineup, which is one of my favourite of all time. I often used to say for a long time this was my favourite CS 1.6 team, because if you had to pick, I once did an article at the end of 1.6, like the greatest teams of all time, it would be like SK 2003, maybe you could have done an NIP lineup early on. You would have had Fnatic 2009. You would have NAVI 2010. You would have the Golden Five. Then you'd have, like, depends if you want to do more scuff. Mouse Sports, I think you could maybe have picked their 2008 lineup or something like that. The problem is we wouldn't have that many tournaments won. So for me, MTW, probably the best tactical team to ever play CS 1.6. This is when they also have Aves for the full IGL at this era in times, not like later when he had Acadian. Obviously, Zonic's like a mega clutch role player. Wimp is like both a star in terms of fragging, but an amazing team player. Sunder is like a streaky style of AWPer who's really good at the first shot, funnily enough, but not like the traditional sit in the corner AWPer. MG's like a really good anchor and small site player if people don't know. It's just a really good, well-balanced team. MTW and Mouse of this era, I think, are two of the best well-balanced teams of all time in CS. That's why they both had amazing map pools, could play every opposition. Oh yeah, that's it. Mouse was also one of the main contenders this year. They were actually one of the only teams that could go head-to-head with MTW. So I think this is a very, very good team. And this was, from what I remember, a very good performance as well. Like, this is also a year, by the way, when there's not that many scuffed ones. Like, SK Gaming is really good this year when they qualify for this from the Swede. It's not like when people like Speedlink and R-Laget and shit like that's qualified. Eastro's obviously mega. This is actually the one where CB team ended up having a shocking run where basically a bunch of the old Norwegian players just came back for one last run. It obviously, Element famously never got to go to World Cyber Games. So in this particular case, he was, he might have been to WAD or something. He was playing now with Real again and PRB, etc. and a scuffed team, but famously they almost got the bronze medal. They almost actually beat MTW, if you don't know. They almost beat them 2-0. You had the gameplay, which is again 2008. This is the Finns without Lurpus, so it's a really skilled team which doesn't have the tactical know-how necessarily. You have MYM, which is the team that's just won the last major. Gravitas Gaming from NA, admittedly this is one of the worst years for NA. MIBR is still good. It's got Kogu back in the lineup. It's a slightly scuffed lineup because it's basically like a mixture of the one that won the roster and then BTT who came in. PUB is just like a really good mixed team of Russian players. The UK team's not bad. DTS is actually a half decent lineup. Attack Alternate actually has the real lineup here, which is key. Normally Germany doesn't get to take a real lineup to WCG. So let's go and let's look at, and obviously the million teams gets World Cyber Games. So if we go to, looks like group stages are kept at the top. Let's see. Where MTW starts in the group with K23 and Alternate. So there is some upset potential there, but it doesn't happen. In fact, actually, it looks like you're just fucking stomping them if you're MTW. Bizarrely, back then, you had to play all 30 rounds, by the way. That's why there's like 25-5 results here. Yeah, the only team that was even vaguely close was Alternate. That's it. You actually shit-stomped K23 with a Dren. So after that, in the playoff bracket, you got one of the easier opposition. Wasn't this like a Romanian team or something? Where was it? Esport EU. Where the fuck was this team? Wasn't this the team that was like, no, maybe not then. Oh, no, French. There we go. It's a French team. These are like semi-known players. It's not top players. The fact that this is the only player with a page is a bit disturbing. This is like, I think maybe like I would imagine this was a shock. That this normally would have been like the 5th best French team or something, I think. What happened here? So you had Millennium with Madja. They failed. Okay. It looks like Emulate just completely shit the bed. Holy moly. Wow. The reigning Emulate lineup just completely shit the bed at this. The reigning major winners. Fucking hell, that's atrocious. And there wasn't, and against all authorities, just in a different era at this point in time, and there is no good game. Okay. This must have been a dark time for fucking France, I'll tell you that right now. So you got quite an easy opposition in the first round, bearing in mind, I guess actually, to be fair, it's quite fair draws here. All in all, these are quite fair. So you got an easy team, but it is the round of 16. You actually had a close map against them inexplicably. By the way, MTW is a very good team on train. I'm amazed that could be so close. Then you played MYM, which is the Poles. It's actually a really hard team to play the round of 8, by the way. Like Eastro's playing K23. Gravitas Gaming and CB team are playing each other. Neither team should have a chance to win. So you play them. You actually smash them. Wow. That's very impressive. And you dominate in both first halves there. So that's a very legit win. And you haven't lost so far. You don't have to play a very hard team in the semis because, as I say, CB team got there. But there you go. Oh, yeah, they almost beat you 2-1. There you go. They won the first map and shocked you. And then they came really close on the third map, but you still prevailed. Not really that crazy. In the final, you do play one of the better teams. Like SK Gaming was a top team in the world. They won tournaments themselves this year, as I'll show you. They won like IMs, etc. IM Los Angeles, let's see, earlier in the year. Not bad results all in all, some decent ones. You win DreamHack at the end of the year, but you came second at this one. So still a good team. It was close, but you were convincingly the better team, and especially the third map, you shit stomped them. Very impressive stuff. So I actually think these 2 wins here are very impressive wins. But World Cyber Games, you notice, CPLs, etc., they are actually more difficult tournaments to win. ESWC, more difficult tournament to win. So I think my only issue is it was very impressive, but I think I'm going to put you here for now. The problem is it's also one of the best teams of all time, so I could also put you there. I'm going to put you here for the moment we're going to consider. That might be a team that goes up to S. Then we've got Fnatic winning what exactly? Because I'm going to guess maybe that's the IM3 Global one. It must be because of where we're at, because it's 2009 we're going to. So yes, that'll be IM3 Global, which was where the Gooks and Get Right lineup won their first major. Because if you remember, the first tournament they went to was the European finals, and they actually came, I think, like 4th or something, and kind of got upset. And then they came like a few days later or the week later and just wrecked the global finals. So I'm almost certain that's who that is. Let me just double check. Yes, it is. It is. So, I didn't do the MTW one though. Wait there a second. MTW, WCG, WIMP. It says format's missing, but those are still very good numbers. So let me just go and look elsewhere. I actually have the numbers for this one. As you can imagine, this actually probably deserves to be S tier from the performance because everyone fragged out. Right, their worst is MG, and he had a 0.71 KPR. 4 of the players on MTW were 0.8 KPR. That is actually very impressive, including their IGL. And if you go look when they played the good teams, in the final, all of them are performing quite well. When they played against the CB team, where they barely won that third map, Ave actually fucking carried it with like a 30 bomb or something mental like that. What is this? He had like a 30 bomb for the fucking map. Wow, that's very impressive. Against MYM, one of the harder matches. It was people like, I mean, they were taking turns. It just depended on the map as to who did well. But WIMP in general was mega. Wow, that's actually very impressive, I've got to say. It's just the tournament thing is what makes me think it should be down there. But I guess for now I'll put them here because I do think they're one of the best teams of all time. We'll think about that one as we go on. So, Fnatic. How does that work? I think if I do this, I can find it. Let's see. There we go. So this is obviously one of the best lineups to ever play CS. You could argue this was the event they first got activated to become super, super dominant. And famously this year, the only people who could contend them was like MTW sometimes, but then they changed their roster. SK could like get close but lose to them. And it was only later in the year when the Poles did that miracle performance that they actually were able to sort of upset them. So one of the strongest teams to ever play CS because it's a really loose style team, but it hits so fucking hard. Because unironically, this year, Forest and Get Right are like contending with each other for like best player of the year potentially at this point in time. Gooks is insane as well. He's a top 10 player. DSN and Card have made themselves role players, but as a result, they're mega overqualified in terms of fragging and how confident they are as role players. And they actually did adjust to being role players. I just thought one of the absolute best all-around squads to ever play CS. It was unfucking believable, this team. Forrest was still extremely good. Get Right was entering his prime. Gooks was just a good player for years and years around this point in time. I also think it's a very loaded tournament. Like you've got MYM, which is still the Poles. This is very good. This is the ESWC champions. You've got Alternate. This is when they got both Romans in. Roman was a Smurf player at this point in time, and they actually, shockingly, I think they came second at the European finals, which MTW won. MTW had their last hurrah with the team of the year from 2008. This is when they've still got that roster. So actually, a lot of people were favouring them to win this IM World Championship Global Finals. The And Then Some team is just a team of like skilled up-and-coming Danish players. You've got people like Freese and Trace, and then this guy was all right. If you remember, he stood in for MTW in 2010. SK Gaming is actually had gotten better at the end of last year, and then they'd done like an upgrade. I think that's when, this is 2009. So it's 2007, they did the upgrade at the end of the year. 2008, they were like one of the top teams, but they weren't the best team. They won Dream at Winter at the end of the year, though, so they were still a strong contender. Crack Clan, this is when Lupus was back with these guys. They were very good, but they just wasn't their peak. Actually, not long after this, their lineup wasn't even around that long. We Made Fox was still a solid team. EG has the American team because they're still figuring things out. This is when they just put together the Cole players with nothing and they didn't get Lupus yet. MIBR is still decent, but this is actually at the end of the time when they're relevant because, like, look at the Scoffed lineup. Some of their better players are off in Fire Gamers, which eventually gets to become these players. So if you go to where Fnatic is, they actually have, I would say, who actually has the harder group? It's tough to say. Actually, it isn't tough to say because here's the weird thing. To qualify, Fnatic has the harder group because there's like a lot more parity. But the actual hardest teams is in Group A, but they're just in the teams that are going to get out. Because if you're MTW, SK and MYM can absolutely beat you. They might be better than you. Who knows, right? Depending on the day. In Group B, Fnatic should win all these games. Like, these are all very beatable teams. But there's also a lot more chances that, like, a Crack Clan could steal a game off you, or an EG could upset you, etc. Fnatic actually won all their games here and handled everyone. This is impressive stuff, okay. The playoffs was double elim, single map, which I'm not a fan of. So not a very sturdy playoff format. I've got to say, it's not as hard to win these as it is to win, like, certain ESWCs or later WCGs. So in this, you play SK in the upper bracket, you smash them. You play MTW, you smash them. In the final, you play MYM. So you actually end up playing all your main rivals as well. You beat them on Nuke in a close game because they'd already lost MTW. So you did beat, admittedly, let's see, you beat Alternate, We Made Fox, SK, MTW and MYM, but those are just BO1s. So we've got, what, like 5 BO1s that I care. You just won 5 BO1s, you won the whole tournament. Now, admittedly, you could say a CPL's like that back in the day too. That's also what I'm trying to factor in here. I do think this is one of the best teams to ever play CS, though. So, like, for now, I'm going to put them, I'm also going to put that S tier. We're going to decide in a minute at the end. Just some of these get bumped down because of the nature of the tournament and who you played. I do think it's a very stacked tournament too. Just there was no best of threes. I do wish we could go back in history and have every major final be a best of 3, sort of. So I'm going to guess it's got to be like Forest for this one. It is. Unsurprisingly, this was one of Forest. Admittedly, over the year, I thought Get Right overtook him as the best player, but he started the year smurfing. Hence why I've actually pointed out yesterday, one of the best movies ever is one called like IM3 EU and Global by Under about Forest. It's a banger movie. After Athens, it's probably the second best Forest movie. Also, let me look. Do I have any stats? Oh, no, my stats ended in 2008, actually. It doesn't matter for that one. Then we are going to go with, this is obviously the polls when they were again winning World Cyber Games 2009. So we already know the lineup. I don't have to run through it for the millionth time. It's actually the last ever major that the Golden Five plays together, if people don't know. And obviously they had no sponsor. So we already know the squad. We don't have to go through that. This is actually a very stacked World Cyber Games, though, by the way. You've got MTW, where they've made the change in the roster over the year and gotten the lineup that was going to contend with NAVI heavily the next year. So a pretty good set of teams, and they're already like contender status from this event onwards, by the way. Like, it's just because Get Right smurfed on them that they looked shit in the semis here. They were one of the better teams at the tournament. You had the Fnatic team, which is the team of the year, and is looking to maybe, at the time, people are saying this is going to be the best team of all time when they win this major. They'd never, any of their players won the World Cyber Games before. Mouse Sports, this is when they had that guy Cash. So admittedly, this is like a not insane Mouse Sports lineup, because you can't have God B, etc., because it's the World Cyber Games and God B. I'm not actually sure what his status is, but bizarrely, he's one of those people who, like, is listed, I think, as like Turkish and can't play for the German team. So I don't know how that works in terms of what he was at, where he was at in his life. Fire Gamers is basically Fallen with a bunch of old MIBR players who used to be Kogu's players. Fallen's playing the role of Kogu in that team, basically. Decent, like, upset potential, but not a top team. The Korean team's not that relevant, actually. You don't even know most of these people. Power Gaming is actually where Nartu and Narsu had beaten, like, what was the top players in Finland, and then they got them to join them. So they made like sort of a super mix of players you all know. They were actually like a decent dark horse team. H2K took Spawn in to play at this point in time because this is before they had Gux, who had like Threat and a bunch of like semi-pro good players from Sweden. Upset potential there. EG, was actually a pretty scoffed lineup. Obviously, they couldn't use Lurpus at this point in time because he's from Finland. You had Turmoil's just all right. Hellraisers has Edward and Marklov, but this is before Navi, so this is just like upset potential. Virtus Pro actually has a mixture of old and new players, so there's always a little bit of danger there. C-Max GG is Dossier and his brother Fox with the players that the next year's was like TPU spots, etc. The next year's when they were more relevant, and Dossier already was very good. Millennium's like some good players from France. WMV's is a fairly irrelevant one. It was just the Savage Show. Tai Lu was still a solid team at this point in time. They actually were pretty good. Alex was a good IGL. Good Rifle was skilled. I think of the other two, that I think TB was the one I preferred of the others, but they're not a bad team. Carl's not a player I know. This is just the Adren Show. So a pretty stacked tournament all in all. Obviously, you're going to have one from each country. So if we go to, again, they actually lost an opener to Tai Lu, it looks like here. So Tai Lu beat you on Dust 2. You lost a map there. In the playoffs, you actually had a very hard run. So I've got to say, this is probably going to be an S-tier performance because you've got H2K in the opener. Right, look who else you could have had. Right, admittedly, you came second in your group. So admittedly, you're potentially going for like a... Because you came second... Where are you? There you go. Because you came second, you play in a first-place team, presumably. So H2K... But to be fair, there's a world you could have had the Elder Gods. You could have had the C-Max GG was... Where was it? Was the Russian team. Yes, that would have been comparable. Millennium would have been easy. Hellraisers was just... It was that Ukrainian one. Yeah... It's not the hardest, but it's not an easy one either. Like, this is a team with upset potential. They also did a decent job against you. In the round of 8, I've always talked about in the interviews, you actually almost lost the power game, if people don't know. I mean, this game was so impossibly close. Like, you really could have lost this one. I also think they were a good opponent, Dark Horse. In the semis, admittedly, this is a bit easier than you'd expect, because if you look at the bracket overall, right, the problem is, the main teams you're scared of in this bracket is Fnatic and MTW, and then on the other side. So you maybe got an easier semi than people expect, still fairly close. And you kept losing your Infernals. And then in the final, it was very close on the opener. Then they had that scuffed thing where they had to go off stage and set up like off stage to play a train. And then you just convincingly won that one. So I do think like the massive delay between the two probably did like ice off Fnatic a little bit, and you just rocked them with one of the greatest single map games ever. So it's a pretty good, like, by the way, to beat them is an enormous scalp. Like, by the way, if Fnatic wins this match here, I'm telling you, to this day, some people would say Fnatic is the greatest team of all time. People don't tend to do it now. They tend to either pick Navi or the Golden Five or the old SK from 2003. But I think this Fnatic would have had so much more because it's a modern day team as well. They were getting like crazy amounts of like money won and in super dominant fashion. So I have to say this is an amazing performance. Yeah, you did lose that one group stage game, but I don't know. I think I'm going to put you here for now. The thing is, you do have one insane scalp, so I'll consider that one. Right, this is going to be Navi winning... logically the first IEM. So let me just see. That's going to be IEM4. This is when it was Navi's second tournament internationally, but I think they'd already played the Arbala Asia tournament before this and won that domestically. Let's see. Ah, right, there you go. What the Oh, you hadn't, apparently. I think something's missing here. Let me just double check this, because I feel like it's just because your name wasn't Navi when you won that tournament, so I'm pretty sure you were like called like Arbalete or something stupid like that when you won it. So let's just see. Let's see. Arbalete events, yeah. 2010, won by Navi. Yeah, this is the event I'm talking about. Arbalete Asia. But they were called Arbalete UH because after this tournament, they did the poll that said, what do you want our team to be called? Our alias was going to be Navi, like that. And then people said, call it like Natis Vincere or something like that. And that's how they became. But it was this lineup. So they had already played a little bit. Like, if you know, they won that land there. They'd had, obviously it was listed as Kirchnet. They'd come like 5th to 6th at the IEM European finals because they'd lost to mouse spots in mega close fashion. So this was the classic Navi lineup. If people don't know, could be I would probably pick them as the best 1.6 team to ever play the game. This is where you had Marklov and Edward were unbelievable stud carries. Marklov may be the best player ever in 1.6, but probably didn't have enough years, but maybe the best carry, one of the best big game players, one of the best AWPers of all time. Edward unbelievably cracked out. Edward was like the Nico of his day. He was unbelievably good on the rifles. Zeus was like a good IGL who wasn't that good a fragger at this point in time, but had been a fraggy IGL previously. He was more like a ballsy go first, like sort of like what Carrigan does now, but funnily enough did call quite a slow game. Senya's like your overpowered support, not in terms of fragging, but in terms of like nerves and confidence level. And then Starix is like a better fragging third star with a decent cerebral secondary calling game. So I always thought one of the best balances of all time, because these two can frag with anyone. This guy can outfrag the third player, but also can be like smart. You have two smart players, and then you actually have a very solid core in terms of base as well. And they somehow put all the egos aside. So this is, for me, one of the best teams of all time. Almost certainly going to get an S tier if the run's good enough. So this was the one where, I will say, this group stage, a lot of people aren't going to remember this, it was actually a very flawed group stage for competitive integrity. Because I can tell you, this group especially, quite literally, had a bunch of games that were DDoSed, and people lost like close games like this, when it was like nightmarish, like you're lagging on the fucking server. I've heard people told me like a rival of ESL's like DDoS the event. Now, if you're Navi, you're actually in the easier group, because in this group here, you've got Fnatic, who's got threat, but they have won the WEM tournament, so they're dangerous, considered potentially can be the best team in the world. They just lost the IEM European Finals, but very close fashion. Mouse Sports with Roman, the German super team, had won the IEM, the European thing. Frag Executors is the Poles, who admittedly, yeah, they've just made the move to Pasha, etc. But you know how dangerous they were in Pasha's. They won World Cyber Games. MTW was still a very good team the year before, and they've now made the changes that they're taking over to be good in this year. And even Oxmoors was a decent French team, if you don't know. This is when MSX went and played. This is basically Emulate, but with Lorden and Drizzer instead of IREC and Hearts, so without the IGL. So this is actually a really dangerous group. This one over here is like SK is good, and they've just gotten Gox. We Made Fox is always dangerous. Admittedly, there's more in Europe. Cole's not that good at this point in time. MYM is the team that had kicked out Modi, which is why they're not as good. And Roskilde Ravens was obviously really good at that European one, but that was kind of a fluke run. So I actually think you got an easier group, and you lost to SK here. So if you see here, you lost to SK on Dust 2, but you did beat We Made Fox, Coleman. So there's not really any big scalps to be gotten from the group stage. You even lost a game. You had a rematch in the playoffs of what happened at the European finals, almost the exact same fashion, by the way. It was an epic 3-game series. This time, though, you're the one that came through. I always wondered in history, the big what if for me with Navi is this tournament. If Navi didn't win this match here, I actually wonder, would they have ever been the same dominant team? Because if they didn't, I can tell you, one, Fnatic was scrimming them loads at the time and would have never have thought twice about them if they lost here. Two, I think Mouse, after beating them twice in big series like that, would have had an interesting psychological edge over them, always matched up well with them. Obviously, 6 dying also this year cost them the ability to compete with them. And then if Navi doesn't win this, I actually think logically that I do think Mouse could have beaten EG, but I think Fnatic would have beaten Mouse, and then I think Fnatic keeps threat for more of the year. So I think it could have changed everything. That's the butterfly effect right there, this match here. So when you win that one, your semi-final opponent, actually, because bizarrely, EG managed to win that group with all the shenanigans there, with Lurpis and Fraud and Nothing and those guys, you actually somehow get EG as your semi-opponent. It's actually a pretty easy semi-final opponent, I've got to say, and you easily control them on Inferno. It's a close game on train, you're 2-0. In the final, it was a very close final. Get Right played great. Some people on Fnatic didn't play as well. Senya played very well from what I remember. And this was always going to be Fnatic against whoever in the final. This is when Gux was on SK, but SK just played a bit shit in the semis, unfortunately. If you don't know, this is when Fnatic had Forest and Get Right, etc. So if you don't know, Forest is the SK killer. So who was the MVP? I'm going to guess it was like maybe Edward? Yes, it was. Right, the reason I guessed it was Edward is I remember this was actually one of the tournaments, I think, where he also won like 1 billion pistols. Like I think he won pistol rounds against Mouse and DJ. He just won loads. He was just winning so many pistols. So not surprising. Look at those numbers. I actually don't have any stats for this one. I already know I've run out of stats. So I don't know why I keep saying I can go back for that one. So let me think. This is a very good scalp. This is a very good scalp. That's just a whatever scalp. And you lost a map. The problem is, as a team, you're incredible. You're really fucking good. But I feel I'm going to put you A tier for the moment. Because that's what I'm going to factor later on, is how do I separate between the tiers? So then we've got, if you don't know, Navi won 4 majors in a row. So spoiler, there's going to now be 2 more Navis. And I already did the ESWC 2010 one because I didn't go in order before. So this is going to be Navi winning the World Cyber Games in 2010. So we can just go up here on this one. So we'll do... Can already just get those 2 ready. Right, when they won the World Cyber Games, obviously the same lineup. At this point in the year, I would say also that like Markov is fully cooking all the time now. Starix is even coming to form. This is when they were actually... This wasn't their best tournament run, but actually, maybe it was their best tournament run. I've just realised, because to be fair, the ESWC one wasn't as good in the group stages when I remembered, so that'll be interesting to check out. This World Cyber Games was very stacked, by the way. Like, SK Gaming had Modi standing in, but you can look at that. That's like a very solid team of players, and they were able to play a lot of people close. This is like a decent French team. Basically Millennium. You have Lions, which is the H2K people, which is where Exist is still playing since before Khan takes him to Fnatic. Exist is still with Threat and Pronax. Pronax was actually, I think Threat was the IGL of Pronax at this point in time. Furta and Crystal are just skilled players. That's just like, that's got some like upset potential. Frag Executors has won E-Stars Soul, but they haven't won any majors this year. But still dangerous. It is the Golden 5 plus Pasha. We Made Fox is obviously good, and this is the year they won WEM, which I think was just after this. So they had an upset win there. MYM's just like the dangerous mixture of... oh no, actually I'm forgetting. This is when they've still got the 2 teams. This is before they combined the 2 of these Russian teams together. So of these 2, this was in theory the more dangerous one, the Dossier one. This one here just had the other good Russian players in the scene at the time. This is even a decent team with upset potential. MTW is obviously like arguably the second best team of the year, really good team. Call is basically that Fire Gamers lineup I talked about previously. EG can't have Lurpus, so they're not as good. Navi's obviously mega. Full Gaming is like the second best Danish team with like real upset potential. Area 51's whatever. No one really cares about these ones. Tyloo's not a bad squad, like I've said earlier. So if we go and look, Navi gets this bizarre group stage where they just play executions from like Indonesia or something. And then that's the only one they had to win. What a scuffed one this is. Then when you go to the bracket, right, here's the thing. Navi gets a loaded side of the bracket. Right, even their first opponent, Lions, which is that Threat Pronax Exist one. Look who else. That's like you won your group. Look who else you could have drawn. You could have drawn Earthquake from fucking Romania. Is that where they are? You could have drawn Earthquake from Romania with 4 players. Don't even have a page. You could have drawn. You couldn't get Executors, obviously. You could have drawn Forza, who's good. MCW is obviously really good. You're glad you didn't draw them. But we'll get into why that is in a second. You could have had EG. That's an easier team to get than H2K, by the way. Oh, wait, so I'm getting it wrong. Lions is that one. So who is H2K then? What am I talking about? Wait a minute. So they even got a group winner. What the fuck? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So how does if there are 8 teams, how does a winner of a group get another winner of a group? Oh, I think I'm going to assume the tie here is wrong and that maybe EG got to be the first place team. But Lions beat EG, so how can that be? I don't actually even know how this match has happened. Yeah, because look, to me that looks like 2 second place teams play each other and then 2 first place teams play each other. What? Nanny? That doesn't seem like it can be right. Maybe it went on overall rounds then, not head to head. Because look, EG's like smashing them, whereas Lions is winning 1 less round against IMA, and then EG wins 19-11, whereas Lions won. Oh, right, because Lions lost to the. I think EG. Okay, in that case, you got very unlucky to have to have this team as your round of 16 team. This is a team that has potential to beat you. In fact, I think this team had even won a tournament with Navi in attendance. Let me double check. Didn't they win like an Asus Open or something with Navi in attendance? What am I talking about now? Aces Open, yeah. This was the one where Adren like Giga smurfed against Navi and like one man carried it. And then this team got to win the tournament that had Navi at it in Navi's peak year. That's a really hard opponent to get in the first round. That's already hard, and actually you've clapped them. You just handled them. Then, admittedly, you get your payback because in the quarters you get the easiest possible team because you got the winner of two shitter teams that no one cares about. There's that Spanish one, and then who was the other one? Fucking hell, Katana. Who even is Katana? Is it really a Japanese team? I can't even see. Oh, they're actually from Belarus. Fucking hell. Okay. So you get a hard round of 16. That's like a dark horse. You get an easy round of 8. Obviously, that's consider that elsewhere in the bracket, in the round of 16, SK just played Frag Executors for fuck's sake, which I believe was actually also, by the way, I'll double check, but wasn't that actually the final of E-Stars Seoul? The final of E-Stars Seoul is also the semis of this fucking tournament. Oh no, this is the year they played. We made Fox in the final. Okay, I'm thinking of 2011 won that one. But that's an insane one. On this side of the bracket's too stacked. So you beat them convincingly. In the semis, you end up playing Frag Executors because SK narrowly lost to Frag Executors. Frag Executors took care of We Made Fox. So actually that was the final of E-Star Soul. It was a round of 8 here. In the semis, you played the reigning champions of WCG. You beat them. Close game on Dust 2, but then you handedly beat them on Tuscan. And then the final, you play MTW. You handily beat them on Inferno. They beat you close on Tuscan. And it's an insanely epic triple overtime. I think it was a double overtime or something on Train. You finally win out. So I would say that's a very good scalp. That's a pretty good scalp. Not the best, but pretty good. Like that's like a top 3 scalp in the world. That's like a top 5 scalp in the world. That's like what, a top 8 scalp in the... This is pretty good so far. In the group stage wasn't too hard. Right, this is going to be surely Marklov. Yes, Marklov Smurf. This is one of his best performances. I don't have the rest of the stats, but I remember everyone was pretty good at this one. I think that actually might be S tier, but I'll consider later because I do think he did beat some good opponents. I will say, if people want to know something, as a journalist, I have to say I suspect they did this, but this is an example of actually, in my opinion, corruption, which is MTW in their group. Somehow in these tournaments, if you ever read the rule book, you could actually know who you would essentially play. And when MTW was in their group stage, watch what they did. They won their first game over this nobody team. Then when they played this shitter team on Train, if you don't know, MTW's fabulous on Train. They play a team from Belarus and they lose 19-11. I can tell you, I was at this tournament. They were laughing while they were losing this map because I think some of the other groups had already been played and they already knew that the other side of the bracket was going to be stacked and that by losing this game, which they do have the chance to rig essentially, they forced themselves onto this side of the bracket where they had Earthquake from Romania, EG without Lurpus, Executors from Indonesia or whatever, Call from NA, Area 51 from Canada, Tyloo from China, and MYM is that like fucking scoffed Russian one. So they just essentially, by forcing themselves with a loss on this BO1, just almost guaranteed themselves the silver medal. Essentially, they'd have had to be upset by an NA team to not win the silver medal. So even though MTW might have been the second or third best team of this year and was very good, this is also bullshit that they got to be at that in the final. But if you're NAVI, it just means you get a better scalp. So fair enough. Then we got NAVI winning their last major together, which was obviously the repeat win at IEM. So this would be the IEM 5. At this time, it was then called the World Championship. So we can go to this one here. Same lineup, obviously, but interesting detail to note is this is where the 5 European Championship before this was where Fnatic, Khan's Fnatic, this one here, had actually shocked everyone by upsetting NAVI in like the round of 6 or whatever it was, and then Fnatic ended up winning the tournament and even beating MTW in the final. This is a pretty stacked tournament because it's IEM, unsurprisingly. NAVI, in theory, are like best team of the world or contender for best team of the world. You have Frag Executors has been getting better and better, and this was the year, obviously, they started properly winning again, and they made it to the final this one. You have MTW's really... Oh, no. Yeah, they did make it to the final this one. MTW's really dangerous and has actually brought in Arcadian towards the end of the year and had made it to the final of DreamHack Winter against NAVI and lost to them. Arcadian actually took over as IGL, if people don't know. This was when Wimp retired. No, what am I talking about? That doesn't even make sense, what I'm just said there. It wasn't Wimp. Who was it? Sonic, Ave, Trace, Minette. So who was the 5th player that were removed? Sunder. There you go. It was where at the end of the year... No, that's just when Sunder just left the team. It's when he left because he just didn't want to play top CS anymore. That's right, he retired from pro play. So he brought in Arcadian, who'd been in that full gaming like IGL, and then Ave just became a fragger basically in this team. And Trace actually was the AWPer, because since Sunder went out, Trace is your full-time AWPer. So that was quite an interesting switch. Obviously, you don't know Trace, one of the best all-round players ever to play CS. So this is a dangerous team too. Fnatic's dangerous in the sense they're like a very strong dark horse and just won the European Championship on the outset. Lions is good because they got Gux into their team again. They got him back from Fnatic. Moscow 5 has now made that complete mix of putting the players over. So they've got like quite a skilled lineup, a really streaky team. Watch out for them on maps like Toscan. TCM is basically full gaming mixed with Roskilde Ravens. Oh, it's actually just Roskilde Ravens. It's just Roskilde Ravens. My bad. But they're not as relevant now. SK Gaming has made their super team this year, if you remember, which, let me think. That's right. This is when they'd bombed the first term, the European Championships, with Alan, and then he was like ill or something, and so they brought in Dennis to stand in, the Dennis from Fnatic in CSGO, and he was actually even AWPing in this team. So that was an interesting roster, and they actually were pretty good at this tournament. Red Cord is just We Made Fox. Complexity Gaming is just the Fire Gamers with Fallen. And EG, this is when Lurpus has now gone back to European Mix, the WinFact team, etc. And they bring in Irakanji from Complexity. So not the craziest roster, but basically most of the best teams in the world at this tournament. In the group stage, NAVI doesn't actually come top. They actually managed to lose one time to... Or did they draw? Oh, there you go. They lost to Threats Lions team with Gux. But they did manage to beat... They tied SK... Okay, they also had a tie, and they did beat Fnatic in the revenge game. So they come out second there, which meant that they had to play the round of 6, but they got Complexity. Amazingly, they got Complexity. Because if you remember, there was this really crazy... what did Complexity do at this tournament to get that fucking placing, though? Oh, it's because Complexity of the Brazilians. There we go. It's not the Americans. That's what I'm forgetting. Complexity of the Brazilians. There you go. Same also on WCG. I just realised I said the wrong one on that one. Right, okay. I guess that's not so crazy then. Moscow 5 and Call would both be on the fence to make it out there. So you get the Call guys. That's actually the easier one. Like, I'd much rather have them than, obviously you couldn't get the same opponent, but the difference is Frag Executors playing Fnatic, that's much more dangerous. You actually... convincingly handle them, not that greatest opponent. MTW is your main rival. You break their hearts as usual. MTW was a very good team. In the final, you play Frag Executors, who at this point in time, this lineup goes on to become better and better. The scalp looks better now. You did convincingly beat them, but actually, funnily enough, the next year was a rematch of this game with the same maps, and actually it was Frag Executors who won that time around. So all in all, I'd say pretty good performance, though. But not like the most insane ever. Frag Executors and MTW, but that is pretty good. I'm going to put them there for now, and we're going to do the last 3, then we're going to sort these other teams. So this is SK Gaming winning ESWC 2011, which was the one where Get Right smurfed. Now, this one, I actually know you definitely did play some really good opponents. So this is the SK Super Team. Oh, I think the Allen guy actually had to retire because he had illness or something. So when they used Dennis initially as a stand-in but didn't win tournaments, they then kicked him out and that's right, they got Delpan from Fnatic, because there was the big drama about them taking Delpan from Fnatic in the same way Fnatic took Gux from them or whatever years earlier. So this lineup I actually think is also one of the best lineups. This probably is a top 10 lineup to ever play CS. 1.6, because Get Right is at his absolute prime. I think Get Right actually might be the best player in the world at this point in time. He was amazing at this tournament. Forrest is good, but he's not prime Forrest. He's more like he just has like a prime Forrest performance. What, like my alarm went off, 1 out of every 3 games or 4 games or something. So he's still, as like a 1B option, he's still really good. Also, in this team, you have got Delpan, who is probably the best AWPer, because at the time, actually, Markov was swapping the AWP out to Starix sometimes. I actually think he was fucking unbelievably good AWPer, like a mega dominant AWPer. You can't ever bomb rush this guy, because they'll always hit the no-scope. Roban is like a skilled IGL with like a mix, like a little bit of Karrigan-esque calling, but also some like reading the game and trying to run off default strategies. Face is one of the best small site anchors and like role players. Like, this team is just one of the most skilled lineups to ever play CS, and it worked. worked. Like this roster worked. Their main problem is they lost a couple of big tournaments to NAVI, the Poles, that stopped them being one of the all-time great teams. This was all the ones they won over those squads. So if you go down to here, their group stage actually, bear in mind you have to come top 2 to get out. DTS Gaming at this point in time is like the players who aren't in NAVI, basically. And if you wonder why Kutchar's Russian flag, I believe he comes from Crimea, so I think he's both Russian and Ukrainian, and sometimes he would change which he showed there. But this was a solid team. People don't know Kutchar was a good player. Angel always was a good fragging agile. I actually thought this Crafted guy was underrated. I wish he'd played CSGO. He was a good player. And then there's... I said it was called Chaos, but it was like Chaos or something if you say it in Russian, I guess, or Ukrainian. Moscow 5 is already a dangerous team. But realistically, you should get through this, and you do. Oh, you got through easily, actually. You're just smurfing on everyone. Holy fuck. It's just a close game here because this was on Forge. If people don't know, Forge was in the pool at the time, and Forge was actually a remake, a rework, or a reboot of Cobblestone, believe it or not. And it was actually a shit map, but... Moscow 5 was one of the teams that seemed to like bone up on this map. And there's 2 maps. That map coming into the pool made Moscow 5 relevant the next year. It's why they had runs at like World Cyber Games where they looked like they could be relevant because they then had Forge and Tuscan they could potentially trick you on. Whereas when it was the old map pool of like Nuke, Train, they could never get shit done on that one. So close, but you still won it. In the playoffs, you play WinFact in the round of 8. Now, WinFact was Lurpus's team, if you remember, where him and Narsu came back to Europe and got a bunch of skilled players from there. They got Aslak as their AWPer. Gigatus is like the aggressive rifler. Basic was like a skilled rifler. It's a pretty skilled team, actually. Had upset potential. Remember E-Stars where they knocked out Fnatic, etc. Of all the teams I could play as a group winner, let me see. You could argue at this point in time, bear in mind I can't play Moscow 5, they're in my group, that actually might be one of the harder ones. The 2 hardest teams to play at this point, since I can't get Moscow 5, is WinFact and Lions. So if we go back up to here, Lions is obviously still a skilled lineup with Threat. And then WinFact is a lineup around Lurpus. So actually to get WinFact is a trickier opponent to get. We handle, obviously this is wrong, it should be the other way around, but you handle them. Semis, you get Mouse Spots. This is actually when Mouse Spots is in a rebuild, if people don't know. So if we go to here, because obviously it's 2011, a bunch of the names you know, like Godby's at the end of his time here, Roman's still around, Zonix is the new guy they brought in who was actually playing fairly well. Carrigan's there just as a fragger, believe it or not. He's not there as an IGL in any capacity. Ninja was a guy who I think was like an AWPer when he was in alternate attacks, but I never thought he was that good a player. For me, this is quite a scuffed lineup, so I'm actually kind of shocked they even made it there themselves. I would have thought Lions would have beaten them, but they didn't. So you beat WinFact easily. You have actually a reasonably close series against Mouse. It's not the greatest scalp to beat. NAVI, though, is everything in the final. Because, one, you overcome a massive character statement game where you win in overtime on Inferno and get right, not only smurfed, but did an iconic 1v3, if anyone's ever seen it, at the A bomb site, right at where the bomb spot is, where he did like beautiful like transitions between the 3 players. And also, this is NAVI who won the last 4 majors in a row, and this is their 5th major final in a row. And on paper, look at what they've done. They've beaten the Russian team, they've beaten the Poles, the top 3 teams at this point in time, by the way, are NAVI, SK, and the Poles. So they've beaten the Poles, and you actually expect now they're going to beat SK and make it 5 majors in one. They're going to be the greatest lineup to ever play CS. Instead, Get Right had other things in store for this team. And this is where actually SK had also just lost that E-Star Souls final to, I think, Frag Executors, where Get Right actually played awesome in the final, but he was just crying because he lost the match. It's one of those ones where I used to be in SK, I used to know this guy. So it was actually a massive win. So if you look at this one, massive scalp to get. All right, scalp to get. Okay scalp, but aside from that, nothing too crazy. So you beat Moscow 5, WinFact, Mouse, and then you beat NAVI. I think that's probably A tier for now, but we'll decide. There's only 2 to go, so we're going to decide this mess in a second. Right, then we've got the Poles winning the last 2 tournaments, because obviously they won World Cyber Games 2011, and then they won IEM 6 World Championship. So, right, I can already tell you, WCG 2011 is a very scuffed event. But the problem is, just to address what I said previously at the beginning of the other one, it does still deserve to be considered a major, because here's the problem with this event. So if you go and look, you're going to see right? If you go down, you're not going to see anyone Ukrainian, right? Oh, you are. It's DTS Gaming, right? The problem here is NAVI didn't win the Ukrainian qualifier. If they'd have won the Ukrainian qualifier, they'd be here. NAVI's still a very, very good team. It's only a little bit of time after ESWC. The problem is because NAVI came third, these two teams technically get the qualification, and Kirchnet didn't attend, as far as I know, because I believe to attend, if you're second, you had to pay your way yourself. Now, what's annoying is if NAVI had actually beaten Kirchnet and made it to the final, Kirchnet was Blade's team, by the way, then I believe that since they would have had a ticket but paid themselves, they would have gone and just paid their own way. What I think happened was, when it was found out Kirchnet wasn't going to pay their own way, it was then offered to NAVI, you can pay your own way and take that slot. But then I think it was like too late and they just decided, fuck it, we will let go. I don't know why I made them French, because I don't know how to do Ukrainian accent, do I? So sadly, it did hurt the event that NAVI wasn't there, but it's not the fault of the fucking Poles or SK that NAVI didn't attend. They could have won the qualifier. They could have come anyway. So that made their field worse. It's going to be worse for this tier list, but it's not the fault of the Poles. So NAVI could have been there. From what I remember, this is the year where there wasn't a Danish qualifier, so there could be no MTW, but I think also MTW around this time had just broken up as well. I think a month or two before they'd broken the squad up. So look, you would have wanted the second best Danish team there, that's true, but the second best Danish team probably isn't going to win this tournament. Then when you keep going down, Sweden has SK, they're a fucking fabulous team, they are the best team, they're a contender for best in the world, that's right there. The problem is after that, you haven't got that many other good teams, right? Because who else have you got? Project KR at this time in history, there's no solo. Tai Lu is still good, but there's no Alex, who was the IGL. So now it's just like a scuffed lineup of fraggers. So not as dangerous. Alex was one of the factors that gave you some of the danger. And good rifle, by the way. The problem is, it's just not that crazy a field, is it? This is basically the same complexity fire games like you've been seeing throughout a bunch of these in this video. Moscow 5's a dangerous team. But obviously it's WCG, so you don't have 2 or 3 Swedish teams, 2 or 3 Danish teams, etc., etc., etc. So when we go down, this was one of the lighter tournaments to win in history. Right, they were called ESC Gaming already, if people don't know, as opposed to Frag Executors. So they beat Virtus Pro, which is going to be Lex and those guys. It's kind of a mixture of new school people and old school. Let's see. You beat them quite easily. You beat this team, which is weren't they also from Romania? Where is BGD? Oh, that's I Got Game. Who is BGD? Is it Serbian or something? Yes, it is. There you go. So quite an easy group stage. In the playoffs, you play Defining Stars, who I believe are from Belgium. Are they from Belgium? Oh, they're actually from Portugal. Okay. Portugal. That's a very easy opposition to get in the first round. Remember, as a group winner, you could have had, let's see, who would be tricky to get? Admittedly, they're not very good because it's quite a weak tournament. Like, I guess maybe Project Cow will be harder or Tyler or something. It's not that big a difference, is it? It's not the end of the world. So you beat them easily. In the quarterfinals, you play Isahara, which is obviously the French team, which is basically not even that good. That's not a particularly good French team, by the way. I'm actually amazed. How the hell did they win the French qualifier? Again over Millennium. That's because there's no MSX. That's why then. Right, well, that explains that. What a shit era for France this was. If people don't know, France used to be a very relevant team in international Counter-Strike. Not like as a championship team, but like as to have like an upset potential. There's fuck all upset potential here. Right, in terms of who you could... Also, by the way, your side of the bracket is the easiest side. Look at your side of the bracket. The Poles are on the side of a bracket with Isahara, Executioners, Defining Stars, Entity, Next, I Got Game, and Fire Nation. Right, the only team... In fact, there's none. There's no team at all I'm scared about there. Because think about it, everyone else good is on the other side of the bracket. Like SK Gaming's over there, Mandic is the Brazilians, Moscow 5's the Russians, Project Car's the Koreans, Virtus Pro the Russian, fucking hell, the Ukrainian teams. They've got an insanely easy side of the bracket. So spoiler, this is probably going to be one of the worst majors, whatever. So you beat Defining Stars, you beat Isara, you play Adren's fucking Next. You're playing that team for a fucking medal. That's criminal. At least you're not losing maps, I guess. I'll give you that. In the final, you play the one team that matters for you in this tournament, which is obviously SK, and it's incredibly close. If people don't know, this is one of those ones I did a breakdown of on the SK site back in the day. It doesn't exist. The web video was down from years ago. And basically, I think at some point in this game on Tuscan, it's like 11-11 with SK on T-side. It was a T-sided map, but they should have won that. I think even EC was like on money problems, but they just did these mega balls ECT pushes and they were able to win out the game and win out the 1v1s, etc. So that is a massive win, but it's very, very close. So I've got to say, I do think, by the way, bear in mind this is a lineup with Pasha, right? The interesting thing is, I always thought Pasha is more skilled than Luke, so it's a more skilled lineup in an era when people are more skilled, but it's not as good a team player wise as the one with Luke, because Luke was a better team player in my opinion, and obviously could combat better. Pasha was, let's say, not the most cerebrally gifted player, and back then I don't know that he talked as much, didn't have the same confidence. Luke arguably had too much confidence. So I think for me that's going to actually go in a C tier immediately. It's a very good team, but who did you beat? Just SK, wasn't it? Then the last one is when you won IEM. I'll tell you right now, you're almost certainly going to get much higher marks for this IEM win. So if I show you this one, obviously same exact lineup of the polls, ESC. At this tournament, you have SK, who, by the way, have brought in Trace. That's right, they had a super team once that featured Forrest, Get Right, and Trace at the same time. And remember, because Trace was AWPing at this time, all three in theory are supposed to be able to coexist. Like on paper, this is one of the most skilled lineups to ever play Counter-Strike. Every player here at times has been a very good player, but it just didn't really work that well, believe it or not. And they had a chance to win this major, but they didn't. And then aside from they won like an Intel thing or sort of like a fucking Swedish tournament or something, aside from that, it actually just didn't work. I mean, admittedly, Danish player in a Swedish team's not necessarily the best mix, but you can see where they gambled on this with no MTW. After just gambling, let's just win everything on the way out the door. This is basically some form of like the Call Fire Gamers lineup of Brazilians. Again, Tyloo's lineup. Fnatic at this point in time has Gux and Freeze in it. They've got a different mixture together at that point. Modi, this is where they made this is the last ever tournament Khan played, if people don't know. Like, that was a gamble to try and win the championship. There's the Roskilde Ravens players. Navi's obviously still really good. It's only that they didn't get to attend World Cyber Games that broke their streak of making major finals. Win factor is solid, but I always thought the HN guy wasn't that good, so this lineup's a bit whatever. Mouse Sports is when Zonic actually stood in for them for a couple of tournaments, along with Carrick. This wasn't a very good Mouse Sports lineup, by the way. They were on the outs. Moscow 5 is quite dangerous. Lions is like dark horse potential. Isahara's not that good. Yeah, there's some pretty good teams here. This is the end of 1.6 anyway. ESC barely gets out of their group. This is the craziest thing of all, is they almost didn't get out of their group. I'll show you in a second. Tyloo on paper, by the way, could have gotten out of this group. Like this lineup, with the Savage guy going absolutely crazy, almost snuck out of this group, and it meant that the Poles wouldn't even have got to win the major. Because watch, where are they? Tyloo beat an Exis, then Tyloo lost to ESC, then Tyloo beat NAVI straight up, then they beat Mouse 16-3, and it's just because they lost here, and it's like the order of events. I think it was this game here. I think it was like Navi barely beat ESC, and then like something else happened. I can't remember what the situation was, where like Tyloo could have gotten out, but I think they lost because they must have lost the head-to-head. Let's see. Tyloo head-to-head they lost, and then on rounds they also would have lost. So that's part of the problem. But in terms of wins, they had enough. So ESC just snuck out. And they lost to Navi in that close game on that there. So who did ESC lose to? They lost to SK, got smashed by them on train. Okay. In the round of 6, they played Moscow 5, who was a dangerous team at the time, easily beat them, including on their, arguably the home map of Moscow 5 Tuscan. Semis, you played that SK super team. Very, very close series. Pasha went off on this one. I think if SK won that, by the way, I'd have loved to have seen that series, SK against Navi in the final. In the final, it's a rematch of the year before, same exact maps. Oh no, actually it was just 2 in train before, whatever. Close series. You even have to come back from Navi having the winning CT side both times, and you come back into it and win your CT halves. I think if you look who you beat, SK and Navi are very legit opposition to beat. You didn't do that well in the group stage. I think that's a B for now. I don't know, because he did beat SK and Navi. We'll think about that one for a second. Right, what we're going to do now Also, I just realized I didn't do the last few of these, did I? So let's just go down the last few. So again, this might shock people, but just like at ESWC, Taz was actually the guy who fragged out at that one. Wasn't even Pasha who got it from IEM, but that's because Fadden's fault. Neo had smurfed at World Cyber Games. It was unbelievable. Get right, I told you I had one of the best performances ever on this one. Edward was when Navi won the second IEM in a row. So now the only question is, do I swap some people around? Because if I'm looking here, who deserves to go up or down here? Like, crucially, the teams in S tier, not only are their tournament wins really good, but these are the greatest teams to ever play CS. It's like SK, the Pauls, MTW, the best Fnatic team, Navi. These are the best teams to ever play Counter-Strike. In the A tier, I've got like Navi, SK, who won. I actually think, will I even change anything around about this? I guess if I'm put someone down, I could go down. Like, who could I put down? I think I just said, like, ESWC, that wasn't that crazy, but it is one of the better teams of all time, though. So I don't know, you did beat Navi. That was a very good win. WCG, you only really had to beat MTW in the final, so maybe that one goes down. Oh, that's right. I'm doing it wrong here. That actually... Wait a minute. Oh, no, Navi was on the hard side of the bracket. That's right. Yes, that's right. So this is when you won IEM. This is when you repeated at IEM. Pauls, that was a pretty good win at that one. CPL Winter was pretty good. CPL Winter 2004. I feel like that should probably go down to B. Because remember, they beat like Gamercore, who's good, or rival. I think it was Gamercore. You beat Eyeballers really close once and then lost to them, but in like a scuffed manner. But the rest of the tournament, you didn't have SK there. You are a really good team. I think that deserves to go B. I think we'll put that one B. Let me think who else. Is there anyone else deserves to get bumped down? You did beat everyone you could on this one. It's just I didn't think... I don't know, because that was a very close final also. And to me, the problem is that just isn't one of the best lineups of all time. I know it was awesome at that tournament, but that's the only tournament it existed for. SK winning CPL Summer, I also don't think deserves to be at the top. But you also didn't lose. Team 3D, you did beat all the top teams there. SK winning CPL Summer 2003, you were very dominant. Let's look at B tier a second. Let me actually consider this one in the C tier. Does this win deserve to go down? I feel like those are... Here's the thing. I feel like because this team is just a fluke, they deserve to be D. These are actually like... That's a very good team. It's just it wasn't that crazy a performance and run. And then this is like just one great player in a super scuffed fluke win. That seems fine. Is there anyone deserves to go down, though? I'm now doing B tier. I think what I need to do now is look, is there anyone who goes up or anyone who goes down? So, like, Team 9 didn't win that crazy a tournament. Let me think. They beat Zex. But it was a good team. I feel like maybe that deserves to go to C as well. Let's just double check, shall we? Let's just double check. This was ESWC 2003 I'm talking about here. And this is the one where you easy group, another easy group. You beat Infernum, Good Game, and Zex. Yeah, that deserves to go down. That can go to C tier. It's also just not one of the greatest teams of all time. It's just a good team. MIBR, Complexity. No, that was Complexity. That was Eyeballers. Does Eyeballers deserve to go up? I can just use this, I've just realised. CPL Summer 2004. Let's look at Eyeballers again. So Eyeballers beat Attacks, 3D, Mouse, Death is Eternal, and then SK. So SK twice, Mouse. In the era when Mouse is like a little bit scuffed. So it'll be SK twice. Alternate attacks is a pretty scuffed one. No, I feel like that's fair. I feel like you shouldn't move up from that one, probably. You did beat SK twice, but I just don't think that was actually that hard at CPL to win, believe it or not. I think you actually got sort of like a luckier. And also, let's see, SK... Titans didn't have Wimp, which made it easier. Who else could you have played? You could have played Rival, but you didn't even get to face them. They're the ones who finished third. You could have played NOA, who had Element, but you didn't play them. You didn't play Destination Skyline because they couldn't win out. I think that's actually quite fair. MIBR. Some of these were also format, if you remember. If you notice, a lot of the ones that are like just BO1, sometimes I punished you for those ones. Does this one deserve to move up? Do you think I need to move up the repeat win for... Let's go to the repeat win. Let's see. Because if you remember, the problem was I punished them for like losing games in the 2 group stages. Now, they lost twice in the group stage. Then they beat Emulate, Mouse Sports, and Estro. There wasn't a huge scalp as the problem for that one. That's why I have them down here. There wasn't a huge scalp. That doesn't feel like he deserved to be here. What about... I think that could be it. That could be it. I think this might be my tier list. Because this feels like the right sort of distribution. Like I've kept S tier fairly reliable. I've kept A tier, so you have to be like a mixture of like a good team and have a really good run and get some scalps. And I've taken care of the flukes. And the tournaments that weren't that stacked. I think we've done it here, boys. I think we've done it here. I think that might be it. Dr. Dre had NWA. DMX had the Rough Riders. And who is the crew holding me down, supporting me when necessary? It is, of course, my Patreon subscribers, the Skrilluminati. So this video, along with all the others on my channel, is kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Animosity, Banediesel, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Thooorin, and you know who a special thanks goes out to because it's always my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to find out who are going to be the guests on future interview episodes? Do you want to know who the guests are on my talk shows? Or maybe you'd like to suggest a topic or a guest. Perhaps you even want to take part in one of those lengthy, tailored to you discussions around esports that I do with the top tier donators. If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, then put your money where your mouth is, support me, and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link where in the description box below.